Hi, I'm Rob Cram, and today we're taking a look at Wild Sheep Studios' forthcoming WiLD, which is coming to the PlayStation 4 and is one of the more interesting games to be showcased at Gamescom 2014. It was showcased during the Sony press conference and hosted by Michel Ancel, who's well known for his Rayman and Beyond Good and Evil games. So, looking at WiLD, what we're going to do, we're going to go through the trailer and just speculate as to what the game is going to be about and what players will be doing in the game. Obviously, it's a lot of wild speculation, pun intended, as we don't know very much about it, but we can sort of gather some things from the trailer. So if we look here, the opening of the trailer just gives an indication of the open world. Now, Michel mentioned that the game will be potentially the size of Europe, which is quite a large continent, and offers a expansive world with dynamic seasons and dynamic weather. We'll also assume that that will extend to dynamic day and night cycles as well. So the opening part of the trailer showcases a singular character riding one of the rams with 3 other rams in tow. Or is that 4 rams in tow? And highlights one of the main features of the game is that players can assume the role of a human and also of any of the animals that reside in the dynamic ecosystem that the game presents. Now, the trailer does showcase a lot of elements of this ram and the skull of the ram, as we'll highlight as we go through the trailer. Not sure what that indicates, but I think there will be various factions or elements of factions that players can affiliate themselves with, the rams being one of them. So here we see a shot of the 3 main characters. I say 3, but there could be more characters. There's 2 humans and 1 skeletal character, and then you see the wolves accompanying them. And if you look to the left of the screen, you can then see that sort of sheep's or ram skull making an appearance once again, almost like a marker in the game world. And we'll see that several times throughout the trailer. You can see in the distance now sort of a cloudy look and the far distant sort of a mountainous terrain, and then in the foreground you'll see kind of like flowers, which indicate kind of like a spring season. We're not going to sort of go into detail about each of the characters as such, but here is an interesting aspect of riding a horse. Now, what I find interesting about this particular scene, aside from the fact that there are 2 people on 1 horse, which could indicate that characters have their own set of abilities. So I'm going to assume then that this male character has some form of horse whispering ability and is able to tame the horses, whereas the female character does not, because you would assume then that if there are more than 1 horse in the world, that she would ride independently of the male character, and they both have horses. So maybe that's a sign that their horses themselves are quite rare, and that they're basically sharing the horse riding, or the fact that not everyone can tame the horses to start off with, and that's a character trait for this particular male character. Again, in this shot you can then see that the topography has changed, and you've got kind of like these lowlands and lakes, which make a vast contrast to the mountainous area that we just saw earlier. And then you can see those birds as well in the background. I'm not sure what they indicate, but another feature that you will have noticed from the opening shot are these stone carvings as well, which are quite interesting and a prominent feature of the trailer. Now, moving on, this next scene, aside from that lovely texture detail on the tree trunk, you've got that male character again, but this time looks like he's crafting tools for a trap. And if you look beneath him, you'll see that sheep's skull as well. I assume that's a sheep's skull. It looks like one, but it hasn't got the horns. If you look closely here again, you can also see that the character is not necessarily making a weapon, because he's already got one in his right arm sword, but he's possibly creating tools for a trap, and the sort of covering of where he is up in the tree would indicate that he might be there for some time, overlooking his traps and waiting to trap an animal or an opponent. Not quite sure what that indicates, but it's an interesting feature all the same. So crafting tools and weapons and stuff is likely to be a big feature. Now this scene here shows an adult boar with its offspring, and again we're not sure how that's going to play in the ecosystem. Will players have to attack other creatures? Is it a case of just to survive? Is it a case of looking after one's offspring? Or do players have to then attack the offspring to dominate other species in the ecosystem? That's quite an interesting feature potentially. Now here's one of my favourite scenes of the trailer. The guy that we only see once, we're not sure whether he's an enemy or a friendly, or whether that's an actual playable character, but he's submerged in the swampy murkiness, and he emerges from that almost like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Predator movie, which is quite interesting. Now this could indicate that you will have to stalk your prey perhaps, and definitely the movement is of a more stealthy nature. Now the next scene, you're seeing one of the women characters either stealing the eggs from a nest, and if you look closely on the ground, you can see that there's some sheep also. So maybe again she's affiliated with the sheep, and she's stealing those eggs to either fend for her survival, or they perhaps to stop the continuation of the birds spreading in the ecosystem by destroying its eggs before they hatch. That's another aspect to consider. Now here's an interesting scene where you've got about 8 wolves attacking a singular boar. Again, the season looks like it's autumn. If you look at the trees in the background, the leaves look like they're dying. And you'd assume then that these wolves are hunting for food to survive for the harsh and cold winters. But again, we don't know who is playing which side. I mean, are these playable characters? Is this a natural event that will happen regardless of the player input? The natural order of the ecosystem, where wolves will hunt in packs and they will take on the AI wildlife. Now another scene which is quite interesting, and again we get to see those stone carvings overlooking proceedings, is the fact that the characters are all kind of around a campfire, and it looks like they're sharing their stories around the campfire. Now Michel Ancel spoke about the sharing aspect of the PlayStation 4, and I certainly believe that a big part of this game is the fact that players will be able to share their experiences, not necessarily whilst they're playing in co-op, but also to the wider community by sharing their stories of their exploits in these expansive lands. And I believe that this kind of aspect of sitting around the fire indicates some of that storytelling. Now this is another great scene underwater, and you've got the female character wearing those horns. Now there's 2 female characters and a male character here, and just proving that the game world doesn't just exist on above ground but also underwater. Now this is interesting. We earlier saw the wolves attacking the boar in sort of a autumn season. Now it's winter, and we've got the similar kind of scene where wolves are now attacking or eating the boar. It looks like a boar, it might be another creature, and they're eating for their survival, one would assume. But what happens next is quite interesting. You have this character with those ram horns again popping out from the under the snow, and then attacking those wolves. Now what's interesting about the act of him attacking those wolves is the fact that, why would he attack the wolves? You wouldn't attack all of those wolves for your survival, for food. So there's obviously an element of dominance in the ecosystem, and that particular character and who he's affiliated with, which I'm going to assume are the sheep and the rams, he's attacking them for domination rather than survival, which is quite an interesting feature. And again we see this underwater scene where the character attacks, and again we swap back to the character attacking those wolves and defending himself against those wolves. But for what end is he doing this? We don't know. Obviously, if you're wanting to gather food, wolf meat is one thing that you could eat, but I'm sure there are other creatures that characters can hunt. So it's interesting why he's attacking the wolves in this particular situation. And then he pauses for a moment, and then we see another element of this kind of affiliation with a different animal species. The character looks like a female character with a wolf head, much in the way that male character had the ram's horns on his head. So we're going to assume that there's affiliations with different groups of animals, and this is a female warrior that's affiliated with the wolf pack as she moves towards the character. Now, this is an interesting scene. You've got one of the characters carrying another. We're not sure how this has come about, but it could be that if any of your companions are downed or injured, there's the option to carry them back and heal them or whatever. Now, this is an endearing scene. The cub climbing over the character and in a kind of playful manner, which is quite interesting. And then again we see that wolf with its cub, indicating that there's an element of players nurturing their young and continuing maybe the species, and also protecting them from would-be attackers. And if you look in the background again, you see that ram's skull just perched there on the rocks, overlooking this particular scene. Again, it's a prominent feature in the trailer, the ram skull. Now, this is an interesting scene. You've got this giant coming out of the tree trunk, and again, I believe that this is part of... There are several kind of factions in the game, and you'll have a kind of an overbearing sort of overlord character, godlike characters with whom you might affiliate with, and this is just one of them, I believe, rather than it being an enemy. I'm not sure whether to describe it as an oracle or a shaman or a god or something like that, but sort of a character that you will interact with and either affiliate with or not. And then again, this is an interesting scene now where you've got the mixing of species, not attacking each other, but working together. You've got the eagle or the bird, the boar and the wolf, all seemingly working in tandem towards a singular goal, running together, which is quite an interesting feature. And then obviously the human as well. And then they meet up here against this interesting backdrop of the woman riding the giant eagle. But what's interesting about this scene is the fact that the four characters are bowing down, kneel before Zod, and bowing down before this giant eagle and the character riding the eagle, which goes back to what I was saying about there being sort of these overlord type characters in the game that players will have to either affiliate with or not. And I'm going to suggest that in this instance these characters are sort of bowing down before a greater being, for whatever reason that is. Okay, that's WiLD. The game is obviously, there's not much information about it, so this is pure speculation, and we suspect Michel Ancel will provide us a lot more details as the game moves along in its development cycle. It's been sort of over a year in development, I believe, and looks incredibly interesting, and also highlights that you don't need huge guns and shouting gravelly voice characters to make an interesting game, and this game is surely got my interest peaked, and I can't wait to see more. Okay, I'm Rob Cram, thanks for watching.